different, Phase Smith. What is it you have found?
Aiur, I believe I have found a way to save our people.
I know. I can guide the purifiers through the darkness that lies ahead.
A far-fetched claim, yet I cannot deny its plausibility.
My great vision left in ruins.
That is just it, Aiur. It is as if I am blind.
Back in January, I was watching a blindfolded Super Mario 64 run and thought to myself, wow, that's really cool, I want to do that. What came next was a 3-month grind, figuring out every detail of how to play Starcraft blindfolded, deciding which campaign to play, and routing out every mission. This culminated with a run that I did on the 28th of March on my Twitch account. Before we begin, I wanted to thank my patrons for helping me justify dedicating so much time to these challenge runs, with a special thanks to my Colossal and Titan tier patrons, Paint My Eye, King of Pie, and Aiur Lover. Oh, and this run is on the normal difficulty because I can't bring myself to play on casual. Blindfolded StarCraft 2 requires a complete revamp on how the game is played. Instead of the traditional focus on the mouse, I created a custom hotkey setup with both my hands on the keyboard. I found that using the number pad to control my screen with my right hand while using my left in the normal position to control my army worked well for me. I left the mouse cursor exactly centered in the screen for consistency reasons, and instead used the spacebar to click. For Aiur is a really easy mission to start the run. Being given an enormous army that has to just stomp around the map with no alternate paths to get lost down is about as simple as it gets. For the majority of the run, I utilize the Select All Army hotkey in order to find and control my troops. I go as far as to say that this run would be impossible without this hotkey. There's no room for flexibility in a blindfolded run. Each movement and each attack command that I make is specifically planned out and practiced beforehand. There are 4 ways that I can control my army, ranging from easy to nightmare difficulty. The easiest and most common is corner movement, where I move the screen to the corner of the map and then issue an attack command. This move is 100% reliable, however, it's lacking in flexibility. Luckily for me, it's fairly common for a mission objective to be placed near the edges of the map, meaning it does turn out to be useful quite a lot. For Aiur is a great example of that. My first 3 army movements are taking my army to the bottom left of the map, the top left, and then the top right. This brings down 2 of the bonus objectives as well as 1 of the main objectives. Once I command my army to move, I use the Follow Army hotkey. This tool will lock my screen to a rough approximation of where my army is, most of the time. Once my army is attacking towards a location and I'm following properly, I get to sit tight and listen for audio cues on how the fight is progressing. There are many actions in StarCraft that trigger specific voice responses.
This hive cluster has fallen. Continue on, brothers.
These act as great guides for progression throughout the run. A majority of my strategies in every mission revolve around using these voice lines to understand what's happening and how I'm doing. After reaching the top right comes a bit of trickier movement. Moving the camera in the middle of the map is something that I'll only do as a last resort. Fortunately, this one is pretty easy. In small bits, I attack my army down and to the left until combat starts. The goal is that I get my army to fight the defenders of the objective, but at the same time, I don't bring my screen exactly onto the action. I need it to be slightly above it. Once Celendis confirms that it's time for the final fight, I perform my second easiest camera movement, waiting for an audio cue and then jamming the screen directly onto the edge of the map. It's not as precise as moving to the corners, but it generally gets me approximately where I need to go, with minor course corrections that can be done afterwards. This movement brings my army through the final wave of defenders. The mission doesn't end until this area is completely clear of hostiles. To finish them off, I issue a patrol command to the northwest of my position. It turns out the last valiant defender of the Zerg was a creep tumor. Not that I had any idea of this until I watched the VOD. The Growing Shadow is the first production mission of Legacy of the Void, and it took a lot of figuring out. But first, a no-build section. I have some stalkers to attack move towards my base, and a chasm that I have to blink over. The game centers the camera on my units when it teaches me how to use the skill. After reaching my base in the top right corner of the map, it's gateway time. The first roadblock to producing an army is selecting a probe. Randomly clicking around with a centered cursor to select a probe is not a good strategy. I have to use box select with my mouse, but this will lead to my cursor being in the wrong place. When I was routing this run, I decided that I wanted to keep everything inside of the Starcraft client, so I was having a hard time finding a solution to recenter my mouse. But one day, I was watching over some speedrun footage and I noticed something interesting. If you have a saved game and load it, StarCraft will perfectly center your mouse cursor on the screen. Yes, I said StarCraft, not StarCraft 2. While I do this run, at any time that I have to center my mouse cursor, I Alt-Tab to a Brood War client I have a stalemated game in, hit down twice to get to the load button, enter twice to load the game, and then F10 to bring the menu back up. I can then tab back to Starcraft 2 with a perfectly placed cursor. This is the jankiest thing I have ever done in any type of challenge run, and I kind of love it. Now that I have probes selected, I send them to start building. I use F1 from now on to make sure that I only ever order idle probes, and I spam out buildings. In order to select my gateways, I just build a new one, double click it once it's constructing, and then add them all to a hotkey. The next production problem is Vespene gas. I can make an assimilator no problem. All I have to do is memorize the location of each gas geyser on every map in the game. The problem is putting workers on them. The game has a helpful feature to assist building a gas that snaps the assimilator to the geyser from a fairly long distance. This means that if I successfully build a gas geyser, it doesn't mean that my cursor is anywhere near it. There's no way to click probes to go mine from it. Until I unlock automated assimilators, I'm stuck with the gas that I start with and the pickups around the map. There are no warp gates on this mission, meaning that I get to produce out of a gateway normally. After powering for a bit, I get supply blocked, so I decide to attack because building pylons is a pain. Instead of taking things incrementally, I decide to charge the objective directly. Very quickly, my army splits into two, one getting stuck at the Zerg base and the other moving towards the Protoss. Fortunately, I caught on to the fact that I didn't have everything in the same place and stopped a bit to gather my strength. While I move out to clear the northern Zerg base, a counterattack somehow slipped past my army. I thought that those zealots I was producing out of my gateway would come clean them up, but apparently I had accidentally rallied my gateway to one of my units, meaning that my reinforcements would ignore the Zerglings and get surrounded and killed. Whoops. After feeling sure of myself, I grab my army, send it to the top left, hit the stop command once I hear Protoss fighting, and hope for the best. The third segment of the mission is a joke. Pan the camera to the top right, alternate spamming blink commands and move commands, and Zeratul will eventually figure out how to reach Artanis on his own. Now that I know how to both build and control an army, it's time for one of the difficult missions. Spear of Adun has always been a hassle. Each time one of the 4 objectives is killed, either the Warp Prisms or Nidus Worms start continuously spawning and attacking units until they're dispatched. While it would normally be simple to attack move over these unit spawners, reliably killing multiple targets around my base is just something I can't do. Instead, I decided that the best course of action is to get a decent army going and then kill all 4 objectives in quick succession before the enemy kills my base. After macroing up a decent army, I get supply blocked and decide it's time to attack. Yes, this is going to be a theme of the run. The first objective is reached from a simple attack move to the top right. After that, I'm on the clock. Objective 2 is a bit more difficult to reach and showcases the least reliable camera movement trick in the game. I bring the camera to the bottom right corner and then tap the up arrow 15 times. The distance traveled by the camera each tap is not the same, meaning this strategy is very loose. Generally, the deviation when tapping the up arrow isn't too large, so when I'm doing it less than about 20 times, I'm pretty confident in the results. After point 2 dies, the next one is an easy grab at the bottom right of the map. This fight is the most heavily entrenched position. The hybrid itself is not a huge threat, however, in practice I had some problems with the enemy banelings. Occasionally, my zealots would charge into a pile around the banelings and get themselves so irreversibly damaged that my army would die. Fortunately, the Baneling gods were feeling nice today, and I got off with some mild detonations. The final point is an attack move to the bottom left. I saved this area for last because they're flying defenders and I can't actually kill them. And while half of my zealots decided to be really stupid and run into the well-defended Protoss stronghold, the remainder managed to kill the final objective before the AI finished gutting my main base. Menuing is an adventure while blindfolded. In Legacy of the Void, a large amount of the menu is not hotkeyed. My first task is traveling to a new planet. Each planet is always either to the top right or directly to the left of the center. I made sure to memorize the order of each planet that I wanted, and then I just wiggle my mouse in that direction until I hear the faint hover over sound. Once I've moved to Core Hall, I need to beef up my forces at the War Council. Using the bottom of the screen as an anchor, I spam click while moving the cursor to the right to find it, and then use the top left as a guiding line to find the Assembly panel and the Units tabs. I want the Centurion version of the Zealot, as well as the Dragoon instead of the Stalker. The Centurion is incredibly important. His autocast stun helps normalize enemy damage, and his second ability Shadow Charge is bizarrely important. Unlike normal Zealots, the Centurion passes through his allies when he charges an enemy. This means that no matter how horrible my unit positioning is, the Zealot will always find its way to the front line. SkyShield is a pretty tough mission, hosting 3 major problems. First, the mission is timed. Second, ties back to the gas problem. I start the mission with 50 gas, meaning that I can warp in 1 Dragoon. The third problem are 3 flying Banshees that need to be killed to secure the stabilizers. Banshees beat Dragoons one-on-one. Normally, the mission unlocks the orbital strike ability on the Spear of Adun, allowing precision elimination of key targets. There's absolutely no way to accurately aim orbital strike, and it cannot be used during this run, so I'm gonna have to get creative. But first, there are some easier stabilizers to secure. After powering a moderately sized army, I push the bottom right. There is a stabilizer that's right next to my base, but I'm going to ignore it for now. Because it's in the middle of the map, if I try to go too far to the top right, my army will run off and get killed due to weird pathing. I'm going to end up taking a fairly unconventional clear order as a result. As I clear the bottom right, I get to show off one of my favorite tools in the run. Warp Gate is one of the most powerful tools in the Protoss arsenal, allowing me to directly reinforce anywhere that there's pylon power. And in the Legacy of the Void campaign, Warp Gates can accumulate up to 3 charges of unit warp-ins each. Normally, the Spear of Adun's deploy pylon ability is laughed at as one of the biggest wastes of energy that you can use. However, today, it's going to be MVP. After clicking around to find an open area to deploy a pylon, all I need to do is mash the arrow keys around while spamming Z and spacebar, and boom, instant army. It's actually really great. In theory, I could have done this last mission as well, but the floor was creep, so finding a pylon position is not reliable. After the bottom right is secure, I can attack move the top left. Not only does this movement bring me to a stabilizer, but also clears what is normally the first stabilizer and a bonus objective. Next comes the part of the routing that I'm particularly proud of. From my positioning, I can send my army to the top right. There's no objective up there, but on the way, there is a Vespene gas pickup, giving me enough to warp in 2 more Dragoons. Now that I have anti-air, the 4th objective goes down easily. 1 left. Frustratingly, this one is in a pretty bad position. In order to reach it, I have to resort to tapping again. This part is exceedingly dangerous. If I issue an attack move onto the objective building itself, my units will walk past all the enemies, die, and cause a reset. From my main nexus, it's 15 taps to the left and 20 up. After that, I can only wait, hoping that my forces make it to the final objective. My units do their job perfectly, crushing the opposition and claiming the last stabilizer. Brothers in Arms took a bit of routing to figure out, but all in all, it's pretty easy. I get 2 Terran AI allies versus a Terran and hybrid enemy force. Every few minutes, a disruption wave goes off, stunning all Terran on the map, and then a group of hybrid attacks one of them. Initially in my routing, I was having a hard time juggling ally defense and macroing up a big army to beat the masses of hybrid at the end. This was causing me all sorts of trouble until I realized that my allies could absorb 1 attack wave each without dying. I clear to the right with my starting immortals until I find a group of Terran. I use this area as my staging point. Now all I have to do is power out a giant army. While waiting around, I try to show my stream the hybrid attacks so they could have something to watch. I think I nailed it. There are 2 attack lanes on this map. Once a second disruption begins, I pan up a bit so my forces don't take the southern lane where the hybrid attacks come from. I accidentally attacked move my forces instead of move commanded them, but it wasn't a problem. After fixing that, I send them all the way to the right side of the map and have them engage the final hybrid group. These enemies are no joke. The 4 hybrid make liberal use of the Psystorm ability, which is incredibly effective against my clumped up zealots. In practice, I lost this fight multiple times. I use the pylon to push out additional reinforcements. There's no salvaging if my army wipes here. Eventually, the boys do finish off the hybrid, and I slowly whittle down the 3000 hit point keystone for the win. Forbidden Weapon is the final mass zealot mission, thank goodness. All I have to do is reach the objective with a single unit. Easy. After recruiting some sentries on the map and macroing up some centurions, it's time to move out. And for once, it wasn't because I was supply blocked. The map takes a snaking path that winds back on itself. In many other games, this would be a death trap, but Starcraft 2's pathing is so good that my zealots navigate the twists and turns easily. This is really nice because the sentries I rescue tend to hinder me more than help. My follow army hotkey has a tendency to lock onto them while they get distracted and shoot dumb stuff, while the rest of my army goes off and does the actual fighting. This means that I'm really just hoping things go well while watching my sentries use their tickle beams. The strategy is pretty reliable. The enemy is Protoss, meaning that their unit count is significantly lower than Terran or Zerg. This makes their stun ability extra powerful. The final path requires a large force to breach, but honestly, the most difficult part is that each time I open up one of these doors, I need to reissue an attack command and hope that I don't click on something stupid. The routing on Amon's Reach is by far the thing that I'm most proud of in this run. It's a difficult mission with multiple objectives in the middle of the map, and I have to micro a squad of Dark Templar to get to each objective. This mission is the first time that I have to turn the music off in order to listen to precise audio cues. Getting to the first objective is easier than it looks. I send my Dark Templar to the right and up. Eventually, they will trigger a sequence that a spore crawler starts to burrow, blocking the path. I pan up and to the left and issue a move command. The margin for error here is pretty huge. There's nothing near this launch bay and my Templar will not get distracted. The second launch bay is equally simple. I bring my camera back to the Nexus and head straight up. This lands my forces directly to the west of the shuttle bay. After the third bay is down, I move my camera east towards the third objective. While I was focusing on this, I missed out on something important. One of my units saw an enemy and went off to go kill it. My forces are now split up. Directly to the east of the Nexus is the third objective. There are neutral anti-aircraft guns that are all around the map. These normally act as set pieces and doodads. However, for some reason, you can hear them firing through the fog of war. I pan over until I hear the whooshing sound of the anti-aircraft gun, and then I pan down to the bottom of the screen and issue a move command. My lone wolf DT opts to go his own way instead of the safe path. He dies, and I didn't even notice. I'm now working with a significantly weaker army than before. On the way to the third base, there's a patrolling overseer. It's completely up to chance where he'll be on his patrol route. If he's at the end of his route, I'll always lose one unit, but that happens only about 1/3 of the time. So of course it happened here. I can hear this Templar's death, and in my head that means I have 3 remaining. It's not ideal, but winning with 3 Templar is absolutely doable. Winning with 2, on the other hand, would take nothing short of a miracle. As the third objective falls, I move my forces to the top and right. There are 2 more events with spore crawlers burrowing. As soon as I hear the second one, I pan up and left towards the final objective. There's a patrolling overseer that occasionally will cross my forces. When it reveals them, a swarm of Zerglings will unburrow and attack. 4 Dark Templar slaughter this force easily. 3 is a bit iffy, but it works out most of the time, and 2 is a death sentence. My Templar fall, and I have to restart. I redo the entire mission. This time, with my boys staying together, 3 get to the final objective, win the fight, and I get to move on. This is by far the most gratifying mission to have routed out and execute properly. I feel like a badass when I manage to pull it off, even if I have to restart once. At this point, I've spent an hour blindfolded, and it's starting to get to me. I've done 24-hour streams in the past, but nothing compares to the mental taxation of playing blindfolded. Each movement, each action, takes a decent amount of mental effort, and it quickly drains me. After practicing each mission so much, I ended up feeling relief and comfort as the audio cues play off in sequence and I know what to do for each one. There's nothing like that on Last Stand. The mission has 2 distinct parts. Both are incredibly anxiety-inducing. There are 3 Zenith stones on the map that need to be destroyed. Once they're taken down, I need to defend the center for 25 minutes. My guide to the Zenith stones is that each makes a distinct humming sound when they're on the screen. After tapping left 10 times and up 15, I send my Dark Templar. As the stone's HP is reduced, they start randomly lashing out bolts of energy, and later on using Psystorm in random nearby areas. Whether or not my Dark Templar survive is completely up to luck. I would say around 60% of the time there's no losses, but things are completely out of my hands, and that leaves me anxious. The first stone goes down, but my forces were nailed by storms twice and are already low on HP. In order to find the second stone, I tap left and then pan downwards until I hear a humming sound. My first attempt was a whiff. I didn't go far enough to the left. My second attempt is perfect. The camera goes right over the
Hierarch, there are more resources nearby.
And I miss it because Karax decided to talk to me. This started leaving me fairly frustrated. Finding the stone is supposed to be the easy part of the mission, and I'm having trouble with it. On the third attempt, I do manage to find the obelisk, and started to feel some relief. Until it kills one of my Templar. Each dead Templar increases the time it takes to kill these stones. The longer the fight goes, the higher chance that a random storm is going to find my Templar, taking even more of them down. There's only one left, but I'm not feeling great. There is an upside. The final stone is directly to the right of my current position, making it very easy to find. After sending out my army, it's time to work on the defensive portion of the mission. By going to Shakuras as late as possible, I've unlocked the Nexus overcharge ability. Because it's pretty difficult to build on power fields, the only way to viably defend here is spam a ton of Nexus around the map and hope that I cover all the weak points. Nexus are huge, and there's a high likelihood that I leave an enormous area open just because of small obstructions. Once I can't find any more places to put Nexus, the only thing I can do is sit and wait for 13 minutes. This part is so stressful. There's nothing I can do. If a Nexus dies, I don't know where it is. I can't replace it. It's difficult to explain anxiety while blindfolded. While I'm in this state, my perception of time starts to slow drastically. Each minute feels like 10. I try to calm myself by telling Twitch chat about the stories of me routing later missions in the run. It doesn't help me out much, but it does kill time. After reaching 1 billion Zerg on Shakuras, I finished the mission, and a wave of relief comes over me. Now I've finished the easier half of Legacy of the Void. Before heading to Ulnar, I grabbed a few Spear of Adun upgrades, most importantly, the Orbital Assimilator. Now my gas geysers don't need probes to saturate them. I can finally make tech units and not a moment too soon. Temple of Unification is an incredibly precise and complicated mission. There are 5 locks on the map that need to be claimed. Every 4 minutes, the enemy sends an attack wave that will reclaim some of the locks and then move to my base. Did I say enemy? There's actually two, a Terran and a Protoss. Capturing and taking 5 locks while fighting on multiple fronts at the same time is actually impossible. My army just doesn't have the ability to split up because I have to use the select all army hotkey in order to move my units around. Instead, I need a tightly routed build order in order to complete this mission. My friends went into the map editor to find out the exact behavior of the enemies while I learned their attack orders. After getting all this information, it was time to make a plan. I macro for the first 4 minutes. When the first enemy attack wave dies, it's time for action. After the 4-minute attack wave, the enemy does not attempt to reclaim this lock until the 16-minute mark. This is the only lock where this is the case. The 8-minute attack comes from the right, and now I need to get a move on. In 4 minutes, I need to grab the right lock, secure it, and then move to the center and do the same there. If I don't manage to grab the center before the 12-minute mark, I'm dead. The second lock is 30 taps to the right, and I hit it dead on. To hit the middle lock, I send my army back to my nexus and then diagonally up and right. This is going to send me directly through the lock. Normally. I screwed up. In practice, I was slow and methodical here, but in the actual run, I was really afraid of time, and ended up issuing commands too quickly. My army didn't get back home until issuing its new attack command, and to make things worse, it didn't go all in the same direction, but instead split in two. Half of the Dragoons went the correct way, while another half went up this right-hand side. I'd never made this mistake in practice, and was very confused about what was going on. Luckily for me, the area I passed through is sparsely defended, so I managed to get through, but I lost a lot of time in my rush to capture the point. I need this point in order to manipulate the enemy AI. At the 12-minute mark, an enemy attack wave comes from both sides at once. They make sure the top 2 locks are secure, and then they combine at the middle lock and finally move down to my base. My plan is to meet them in the middle, eliminate them, and then grab the final 2 locks as fast as possible. If I get to the 16-minute mark, the enemy will successfully capture 2 or 3 locks every 4 minutes. I just don't have the ability to identify which locks are captured and resecure them in under 4 minutes. If I mess up, I'm in an infinite cycle of recapturing and capturing locks. To get my bearings, I decide to send my army home and then follow it. Pretty quickly, I was able to hear the dull humming of the lock and knew where I was. The 4th objective is a hard right from the center. It's very heavily defended. There's a lot of siege tanks here, and I end up losing over 20 supply in this fight. The final lock is the most difficult tapping sequence in the run. 15 to the right and 50 up. I knew this one was difficult and I was stressing about it. My taps were short going right, and I didn't make it all the way to the lock. I had an inkling in the back of my head that I had messed up. As I was tapping up, I started worrying about the right taps and ended up losing count. I tap up 40 times instead of the 50. I come both short of the lock and to the left. I have no idea that I made this mistake, and there's no time to find out and correct it. My army attacks towards the final objective with little time to spare. At 16 minutes, I'm dead. My army engages the defenders and slips directly under the capture point, moving past it. And then, something amazing happens. 2 heroic zealots charge towards my army. My dragoons naturally spread out trying to get into range. And somehow, against all odds, my dragoon moves into the capture point for a few seconds and grabs it. Somehow, I complete the mission, with the fade to black happening exactly 15 minutes and 59 seconds. Not even close. The Infinite Cycle is a no-build mission split into 3 parts. Kerrigan and Artanis are both absurd brutes. Kerrigan in particular has an awesome auto-attack damage output, while Artanis can both tank and heal at the same time. The damage from the Xel'Naga constructs is high, but reliable. As long as I'm starting my fights with full HP and using Artanis' Astral Winds ability, it's basically impossible for me to die. After crushing through a hybrid and 2 constructs, there's an obstacle that I was very worried about going into this run: dashing across a ravine with Artanis. With a bit of practice though, and slowly panning over, I easily make the jump over and back. At the end of each section, there's a point where Artanis needs to stand on. Patrolling Artanis from one corner to another is a 100% reliable way to hit the point. To close out part 1 is an enemy ambush. I literally do nothing here and just trust my heroes to clear for me. The second section starts with a large Tal'Darim and hybrid attack wave. This fight can get pretty bad, but Kerrigan ended up 360 no-scoping these warp prisms out of the air before they managed to warp in, making the fight really easy. The next encounter is pure RNG. The Tal'Darim and constructs are fighting. Randomly, they can both decide to turn on my forces and blow up Kerrigan in about 2 seconds. Thankfully, that didn't happen here because I don't know how to avoid it. Making my way to the end of Area 2 is a simple process of corner moving and spamming Astral Recall healing. The final construct dies and moves to open the door for me, and I issue the move command into the room. Except I sent the command off early, so Artanis and Kerrigan run into the middle of the map and idle around. I made this mistake multiple times in practice though, so I was able to fix it very quickly. The ambush here is a free win. I don't think it's possible to die on normal, evidenced by the fact that I took Mr. Laser to the face and was completely fine. Section 3 is the bad part. It's hectic, timed, and has a very powerful hybrid behemoth boss at the end. My strategy is pretty dumb here. I pan up and right until I hear the hybrid attacking, and issue an attack command, and then I hope my units stay together to survive. This is pretty consistent. They both have similar aggro ranges, so keeping them together isn't that much of a... Bye, Artanis. Kerrigan gets distracted fighting some medevacs while Artanis charges forward. Both Artanis and I are blissfully unaware of this. To make matters worse, Kerrigan then decides to say hello to Mr. Laser and loses a majority of her HP. I was only saved by the fact that Artanis deals damage so slowly that he got stuck on a nearby group of Reapers long enough for Kerrigan to join the attack. And right as our heroes were reunited, Kerrigan gets distracted again. Somehow the heroes make it all the way to the final chamber and start the fight. The hybrid behemoth boss does a lot of damage and has a lot of health. The big problem is that there are other units around as well. If the behemoth enters the fight and starts getting targeted while another hybrid is still alive, they will have enough combined damage to either take out Artanis or kill Kerrigan. The behemoth decided to pull slowly today, but that doesn't mean the fight is a free win. This fight is incredibly stressful. I have no feedback for what's going on besides the low health indicator for Artanis, and the fight is long. About 25 seconds worth of spamming mend and hoping for the best. The behemoth was feeling really kind today. He dies without much issue and the mission is done. In practice, Harbinger of Oblivion was a pretty easy mission, to the point that I actually started subbing out its practice for other missions. The first segment is an easy A move. I morph 2 of my Templar into an Archon and then mow through the defenders until I reach Artanis and Kerrigan. After getting my base, the main mission objective unlocks. The objective of Harbinger of Oblivion is super unique. There are 4 void crystals on the map that need to be destroyed. Each has a progressively stronger force of enemies defending it. While I do this, a void rift slowly encroaches on Kerrigan, destroying her buildings. If her hive dies, it's game over. I now have access to the Adept, replacing the Dragoon. They're a high damage unit with a tiny hitbox. This allows me to fit a ton of firepower in a small area. This is doubly important in a run like this because it drastically increases the chances that my force stays together. After building up a diverse gateway army, I send them to the bottom left and then the top left, leading them straight through the first objective point. They crush it without much resistance. Kerrigan occasionally sends little attack waves around the map. They're almost completely useless, but every little bit helps. After the first point is clear, I reinforce an attack move to the top left again to reach the second point. The fight goes poorly, but the second wave manages to break through. From this point, my zealots will automatically lock onto the hostile void crystals and
The enemy bases can wait until we're good and ready.
Wait, what? Enemy bases? This isn't an enemy base. The bases are at the northern side of the map. That trigger shouldn't be happening right now. It shouldn't be happening at all during this mission. Am I at the enemy base instead of the objective? I'm gonna try this a second time. Get my forces together, go forward, and attack. Are these photon cannons? Where am I? I need to pull back. I'm going to the final objective. I'll figure out the other crystal later.
The second Xel'Naga power source has been secured.
That's the bonus objective. I'm close, just a little too far to the left. I can just send my army right over here. My army is dead. It was smaller than I thought. Do I have time to rebuild? There's no other choice. I have to break them with the next wave. This fight went much better. I heard the hybrid die. I think that I know how to get to the objective from here.
Pull back from the shadow tendril. It will only consume you.
Where am I? I can't find anything. There's still 3 objectives remaining and the void zones are going to kill Kerrigan. How long do I have? If she dies, I die. I can't do this again. This is going to be a reset. There's no way. I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. Let's go after the middle crystal. Kerrigan already dealt with its defenders. That's something at least. After that, I'll try the top left again. This is too far north. Think about the map design. The objective is slightly to the south. It's not exactly in the corner. Calm down, go slow, and go steady. After going south, we go to the west.
Only one remains, and the portal is growing unstable.
All I have to do is get my army to the final void crystal.
Pull back from the shadow tendril. It will only consume you.
Don't freak out. Don't panic. The void zone is to the right of the objective. There are no more defenders. All I have to do is find it. Nothing more. Even though I found it and was able to beat the mission, I can't do this anymore. I'm mentally wiped out, especially not in this setting. Blindfolded Starcraft, without a doubt, is the most difficult challenge run I've ever faced.